In this short presentation, we're going to examine how eggs are used in cooking and baking. Some of this is going to be review, and some will be new and be a great transition into our next unit, which is going to be focusing on breads, and then after that, sweets. So eggs are really composed of two parts, egg yolks and egg whites. The egg yolks are mostly water, but importantly, they also have protein, and even more important, they have fat in them. This fat adds flavor, richness, and moisture to foods that egg yolks are put into. Egg yolks also bind liquids and fats together to create an emulsion. So that's why things like egg yolks are used in mayonnaise, and you use the egg yolks in hollandaise sauce. Egg yolks also thicken sauces and add structure to a dish when heated, because those proteins denature the three-dimensional structure of the protein, sort of unwinds as hydrogen bonds break between the chains of amino acids, and then they coagulate or gel to create, can be a rather solid structure or just a kind of fluid but thick structure. So common recipes that use just the egg yolks are things like custards, eggnog, cakes, ice cream, and creme brulee. The egg whites are often called albumin, and these are, not surprisingly, mostly water. They do have some protein in them as well. They make up about 2/3 the volume of the egg. They have a very mild flavor and no color. One important function of egg whites in recipes is leavening, so actually helping things rise. So when you whip eggs, you're adding tiny little air bubbles into that water and protein matrix. And, that alone can, make a foam, which is the next point there. But also when you bake this foam that you make, or if you've creamed eggs with something, the little air bubbles actually expand when they're heated and can make baked goods fluffier. Foams provide or the proteins in the egg white provide a stable structure. So in things like souffles and meringues, where we've added either acid or sugar, that makes those dishes even more stable. One thing about egg whites is because they don't have fat in them, if you're just using egg whites, they can tend to dry out baked goods, but oftentimes sugar is added to help keep baked goods moist. So common recipes that use just egg whites, besides souffles and meringues, which I already mentioned, pavlova, macarons, and marshmallows. A lot of recipes use whole eggs. So whole egg recipes, or the function of whole eggs, is going to be sort of a mesh between the two. So whole eggs can bind ingredients together because of the emulsification that the egg yolks can provide, and then also as the proteins denature and gel when heated. That can add structure and strength to baked goods. The high water content helps with leavening as the water actually evaporates and creates steam. The whole egg adds flavor, color, and richness, primarily due to the egg yolk. And just the combination of the water, the fats, and the proteins can add tenderness and moisture to baked goods. And common recipes that use whole eggs are things like cookies, brownies, bread doughs, waffles, pancakes, muffins, and pastries. All right, so cooking with eggs, a couple just interesting facts and tips. The starting temperature of your egg sometimes matters. So, room temperature eggs actually absorb into batters more easily. And if you are whipping up eggs to make a foam, um, they actually whip more easily and get a larger volume when the eggs are at room temperature. Emulsification works better at room temperature. And when I say room temperature, I mean about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It's easier, though, to separate cold eggs, to separate the whites from the yolks without the yolk breaking. Now, if you have cold eggs, if they've been in the refrigerator, and by the way, if you have fresh eggs coming from the chicken, you don't need to refrigerate them because they do have a coating naturally that the chicken makes that is antibacterial and keeps bacteria from going into the egg. But if you're buying commercially produced eggs, they oftentimes wash that off. But I actually never refrigerate my eggs because I get them straight from my chickens. But if your eggs are cold, you can either let them sit out on the counter for at least 30 minutes before using them, or you can actually put them into a bowl of warm water for about 5 minutes. And it should be warm and not hot. If a recipe doesn't state the temperature, and things like cookies and brownies usually don't, it probably doesn't matter what the temperature is, the starting temperature. The cooking temperature also matters. So coagulation, which is that gelling of the egg, begins at about 140 degrees Fahrenheit or 60 degrees Celsius. And you can see in the diagram on the right, these have all been cooked for the same amount of time, but at different temperatures. So you can see really at that 60 degrees, that egg white is finally, looks white and looks a little bit more solid. And then as the temperature increases, that yolk starts to solidify. And at some point, it gets all kind of dry and cracky. So the texture of the egg becomes firmer as the texture rises, but overcoagulation or curdling can occur if the temperature is too high or if it's left in heat for too long. And overcoagulation can result in grainy textured custards and sauces or rubbery cakes. Now you can actually cook, and I say cook with quotes, cook eggs without heat, really meaning you can make those proteins gel and coagulate without heat. So one way of doing this is cracking an egg into alcohol, a strong alcohol like rubbing or isopropyl alcohol. That will actually denature the proteins, and the egg whites will gel and turn white looking. Now, these are not edible. You don't want to drink rubbing alcohol. But preserving eggs in an alkaline solution, an alkaline means a high pH, it's the opposite of an acid, will also sort of gel those proteins. So the way this works, and I've shown on the right there, these are century eggs, which are a popular dish in China. And these are made this way. So what happens is the sodium hydroxide from the solution, the alkaline solution, diffuses into the egg white and breaks up the proteins. Then, and more than just denaturing, it actually cuts up the amino acid chains a little bit. Then combined with the water, the denatured proteins gel. So they do have a texture similar to like a boiled egg. Maillard reactions between the proteins and sugars in the egg white can contribute to that brown color you're seeing in that egg white. Century eggs are typically also soaked in tea, so some of the color comes from the tea as well. The egg yolks are kind of a creamy texture, and obviously the color has changed. So iron and sulfur in egg yolks react to make iron sulfide, and that's what turns them green. And then the degradation of proteins in the yolk actually give off ammonia and hydrogen sulfide. And this gives off a very strong, distinctive smell. So century eggs are a rather acquired taste. Mostly, I mean, some of it just comes down to the color. We're not used to eating things that look like that, but also the smell is something that you really have to get used to. But people who grew up with them absolutely love them. Now, some people are allergic to eggs. I think like 2% of the population, or of kids at least. And, some people choose not to eat eggs for various reasons. And so there are a lot of things that can be used to substitute eggs. So one important thing, though, is to get the volume of the egg and the moisture content, the amount of water, to be somewhat equal if you are substituting for eggs. So the diagram on the left shows some common substitutions and how much of them need to be used to equal the volume of one egg. And then depending on the function of the egg in a particular recipe, some of those substitutions are better than others. So when I am substituting eggs in baked goods or something where I need the egg to help bind or create a structure, I usually use ground flaxseed mixed with water, and actually creates a sort of gel. But you can see there are other ways of doing that. For leavening, you can actually do sort of a chemical leavening with something like baking powder or baking soda. For thickening, fruit purees or mashed banana works really well as things like tofu or cornstarch.